Welcome back, everybody, to your daily update on the state of the Malazan Empire, and we're nearing the end of Return of the Crimson Guard. This is the video for yesterday that I didn't make yesterday because stuff. I'm making it today, and if all goes well, I'll wrap it up later today and do the second one, record the second one later today, so it'll be up tonight or tomorrow morning or whenever. Anyway, time to talk about battles, shall we? Because that's basically all there is in these two chapters that we're going to talk about today, which is chapters 1 and 2 of Book 3, Fates and Chances. Well, cheers, I guess. Alright. So yeah, we've ended the last chapter and the second book with the internal battle between the separatists, or whatever you want to call them, the Italian League, and the Empire. The Italians lose, and the Empress is now back in command, or is she? Now this is when we have to talk about something that I forgot to talk about last time. I mean, I already rambled for way too long, so no problem there. And that is the ruthlessness when it comes to that final confrontation between the Rhinelanders and the Italians that are outside the redoubt and are attacked by Rhinelanders and killed, and the way that last scene uses that to pressure Urko and others into submission, well, not further submission, and to get something out of them. And this is, once again, something that we need to talk about, because it's something that we've seen before and mentioned before, and we'll see more of it, I guess, today. That is the idea of control, fear versus trust, and loyalty. We've spoken of that before, that someone like Dasem has loyalty, his followers are loyal to him. That may be partly because of charisma, but also because of the way, and we see that later today when we're talking about Corbolo Dom again, who doesn't have that. It's like Dasem and others of that group, Urko is another one of them, have loyalty because they always, stuck out and did their best for their men, well, not men, but for the people under their command. And Lassine doesn't have that, which may be partly because of the way she operates, partly because of her, being part of the clan, not your open field command or whatever. But Lassine rules through fear and control. We've seen that before. We've seen it in Deadhouse Gates when it's about the call of the nobility. She does all of that. So at that point, even though Urko has already said that they will do whatever they can to help the Empress against Rylanderus, probably also against the Crimson Guard and whatnot, she still needs to make her point, to drive home her absolute control there, which she does by having the Italian forces weakened by Rylanderus. Now, but is that, like, in the long term a good strategy or not? I guess we'll have to see, but it's important to keep that in mind because it's that ruthlessness that we see with the Empire, and we'll see more of it today. Now these chapters are mostly about a battle. It'll continue even in the last couple of chapters, that being the battle between the Imperial forces, Imperial and Italian forces. Oh, technically they're all Imperial on the one hand, and the Crimson Guard on the other hand. And we have small things happening around that we'll have like small glimpses of, but that's sort of the main thing. So there's a lot of like tactics, strategy, which unit is moving where, and all of that stuff going on, which is something that I'm personally not that much interested in, because I'm not a war gamer, I'm not a military historian. I don't care about which unit is marching where. That's not exactly what I'm interested in. It is still handled really well. As we've said before, Cam Esselmont excels at describing large-scale and even small-scale military operations. He does it in a different way than Stephen Erickson does, with way more focus on like movements of troops and all these aspects that I just said I'm not interested in. But he does it very well. So there's that. We also see the further like growing up of Nate, which once again I feel is an interesting thing to look at. He's now a sergeant of sappers and becoming more and more, I don't want to call him responsible. Well, he's a bit responsible as well, but he's taking things more seriously at this point. And this is something that I found, overall handled really well. You see him from like the very irresponsible Coast Guard, constantly fighting with his superiors, behaving badly, just being in there for, to make as much money as possible and have a quiet life, to becoming a responsible soldier, trying to look out for his the people under his command, and so forth. And we see that in like that scene we have right at the beginning, or at the beginning after the conversation between the Crimson Guard and Corbolo Dom, which is just Corbolo Dom doing Corbolo Dom things again. When we have the conversation with the officers under Braventooth. And this is, I feel, important, because you remember, or maybe you don't remember, when we have the meetings in Dust of Dreams, when Fiddlers, like that's how we used to do it. We have like all the sergeants, all the officers below the main command actually talk through an upcoming engagement and all of that. We see that whole thing in action here with Braventooth. Of course, there's captains there as well, but they leave at some point, and he just remains with the sappers and explains what will come in the near future, which is a lot of warfare with a lot of magics thrown in. We, get the final confirmation that those two bastards, Temper and Feral, who may have all kinds of other names, are obviously Dassim's Sword Brothers and, well, the people from Dassim's Sword, and are doing whatever they will be doing in the near future. And then, the battle starts with that plot of, like, having that one defensive post that Sergeant Jumpy decides to build up, and things going from there, which is, what we're going to talk about in a second here. So let's zoom out a bit and see what is going on overall, and to finally judge later on tonight whether Cam Esselmont succeeds in what he's trying to do. We said it before that this novel is spread out a good deal all over the place. There's way more characters than in other Esselmont novels that we've read so far. It's geographically spread out all over the place. We even go to Jakaruku of all places. We're on the Wiccan Plains. We're in Lehang, and so we're on the Seti Plains. We're all over the place, and we're nearing the end of the novel. The last part, the third part is much shorter than the other two. But it is the point where Esselmont, as a writer, needs to tie all these threads together to come to some form of a satisfying ending in some way. Because unlike, say, The Path to Ascendancy or the Malazan Book of the Fallen, these are like individual novels that are just loosely connected. This is not, the first part of a trilogy, and we can just leave a lot of stuff open for the next book. That's not how this works. So he has to slowly but surely connect all these things, maybe even build in some sort of climax. And this is the interesting bit, because we already got like a huge battle before, which is the internal warfare thing going on. So how can he, or can he top that in the battle with the Crimson Guard? Now, we know that the Crimson Guard avowed are super tough and all of that, but we haven't seen much of that yet. We know they're supposed to be extremely tough, but their first meeting with when they show up in Unter, while they mostly survive, really doesn't show off why they are so feared and whatnot. So this is his final chance to have that old school, old style battle. And this is sort of where the whole thing is going. We'll see all of that here in these chapters. It's like he draws all of that together. It is, as I said before, this book deals a lot with the question of going back into the past or saying goodbye to the past. This is very much a novel about the end of an era. Much more than, say, Night of Knives was, or Gardens of the Moon is, or whatever. The change of rule from Kellenved to La Scene is much less of a end of an era than this here is, because this is sort of where all the old guard, whether crimson or not, shows up. They all do the whole how they used to do it thing. There's a lot of nostalgia here, and this is something that shows up in this, especially in chapter 2 of book 3 here, is exactly that. You have all those people once again duking it out on that plane in front of Li Hang, like we used to at the beginning of Path to Ascendancy. And this is sort of where the chapter of building the empire closes. And Asselmont does good, I think. Now he, as I said before, he's really good at describing a large-scale battle with all the details, which I personally I'm not very interested in. But it's believable, and it looks really cool. It reads really cool. There's large-scale magics being deployed, and we finally get basically something that we have seen on that level of magics being just blown out there. I guess the last time we've seen anything like that was either the beginning of Gardens of the Moon or the ending of Memories of Ice. Well, obviously, with Esselmont, we haven't seen anything like that before on that scale. We obviously see it in Midnight Tides, but different continent, different people at war. But this is the whole thing. We see how that deployment of that kind of magics, or what you might call weapons of mass destruction, basically, how that makes the individual soldier almost irrelevant. And there's scenes in there where it's the regular soldier can just keep their head down and hope they won't be hit by any battle magics. So we have, even there, in the way that battle is fought, we have a return to the old Empire days, when everyone was just blasting away at each other with as much firepower as they can find. But we have all these interesting bits on the sideline. We see how slowly over the battle, Commander Ullin becomes accepted as overall commander through his actions, through actually understanding, caring for soldiers, trying to do his best. And we see how from interaction to interaction he gains more and more respect from from even the Imperial people. And that one is just a really nice story. And this is, I guess, when we look at what's going on here, it is a war movie or a war story, and those follow, if you do them right, they follow specific rules. One of them is jumping around from soldier to all these different points, showing how all of that works. If you read The Heroes by Joe Abercrombie, he does the same thing in a really good way. You have people from both sides, you see how they all come together to this large battle that may or may not be necessary. Most of the time it is. In that kind of story, it would be avoidable and is just like plain stupid, which is sort of that metaphor of like war being when we as a society lose control, and that's the cost. It's like we just like go at it and kill each other for meaningless reasons. We see a lot of that going on here. But there's also all these like smaller things going on in the background. We have we have yet another scene at Corn Harbor. Corn becomes more and more like a running gag place where every time someone shows up, the Cornies are idiots, and those people and the Cornies kind of get their comeuppance. And this time around, we meet the Ragstopper, who we have met before, who is another one of these, like... I mean, there is obviously that parallel from with the Ragstopper and the Flying Dutchman in a sort of metaphorical way. Just that the Ragstopper is more obviously real, because we've met the boat and the captain in Deadhouse Gates, for example. So we know they are real, but it still kind of serves that function. Like, no one trusts, like, everyone thinks that ship is haunted, and then everyone on board of that ship is seemingly mad. So that interaction is just, a really cool comic relief almost kind of thing. But it also, I feel, serves as a sign for this, like, passing of an era, because they leave Korn. It's like the Empire has final control, and us free traders, freebooters, whatever you want to call them, because there are all kinds of weird things on that boat, we'll have to leave this area because it's sort of the age of the Wild West, or like of freedom and wildness, is passing from the Empire. Finally, fully passing from the Empire. The good old days are gone, and the leaving of the Ragstopper kind of shows that as well. Plus, they have a ship full of Morant munitions, and that's pretty fucking cool. Yeah. Another thing that we see here is the probable end of the Malik Rail Gistal ritual over Mael. Now, we've already noticed that Mael is not exactly a fan of Malik Rails, but Malik had this control over him through the Gistal cult, and this is something that I wanted to point out, because it's like throughout the story, throughout the book, we always get these small mentions of all these votive offerings that float out into the harbor, and it gets mentioned in the oddest place, but it's always just that. And it is at this point when Malik finally realizes that this is sort of the revival of general like sea worship, and through that and the fact that he now has different worshippers all over the place, that is how Malik can unravel that Mael can unravel the bindings of the Gistal ritual. And I think it's worth pointing out that those things have always been in plain sight, but it's so easy to overlook them, and they just snap into like focus and make sense once they make sense for Malik, which is interesting because Malik is one of our kind of viewpoint characters, and one of the few that we'll see where Malik will go in the future. And it's interesting to see that here. So this is the other part, like the binding between Malik and Mael is sort of loosened as well. So Malik is on his own now, which will lead the question, like, does the Empire have any divine patrons now, or are they also just left to themselves now? Now, we need to talk about Hurl and Storo. that one is one of the saddest scenes in the book, when you have those, when Hurl is leaving to hunt Rylanderus, and she says goodbye to Storrow, and you see how badly Storrow is mauled. And you have that point where you kind of realize that they both may have feelings for each other, but because they're broken soldiers with all the emotional wounds that kind of thing carries with itself, that they are just incapable of actually ever expressing that. And you have that scene when she leaves, and she's like, they might just be the greatest cowards in the whole thing. It's like they probably both know, and the way how Storrow is like, everyone leaves. That's just really, really sad. It's like, I don't want to say an ode, but it's definitely a... Holy shit. It's well, at least nothing's exploding this time around. Anyway, it is certainly a memorial to missed chances. I personally find that very sad and touching. Oh, another thing that I find is handled really well is the Edgewalker story. How throughout this battle that is spilling over into all kinds of warrens, you have Edgewalker getting more and more annoyed that everyone shows up in shadow and just kicking people back. I really, really found that very interesting and funny. We obviously have the great Kaz reveal, which I don't think is that much of a surprise or that much of a twist at the point when it finally comes out. I guess the really big question is, and that's something that I don't think was ever answered, is does Jan or Kaz know who he is when he links up with in Jakaruku? Or does he realize in that moment when Shimmer calls out to him? Is that the point where he kind of comes back to his identity? That's something that is still open, but I guess we'll never know. Anyway, this brings me to that thing that happens in chapter 2 mostly, which I would call the big epic part. It's that that gratifying epicness. It's, you have all these people coming back. You have the last ride of the Wiccans, which is just over the top, heroic, obviously sad at the same time. But it's the kind of big emotions that you want in in mythology or an epos. It's that they come through, they save the day. The people that have been kicked all the time because they're still true. And then you have Kaz show up and sort of take over the Crimson Guard again, and that bit gets sort of sorted out. And then you have that final duel between Dasem and Skinner, when Dasem is backed up by Temper and Feral. And you have all these, everyone goes in there for that, final bow on the stage and doing their final thing. We even have that conversation between Lassine and Shimmer. Well, even Lassine goes out and fights people and saves Shimmer's life, for fuck's sake. This feels like that big end of a whole era, which what is exactly what it is, when everyone who was formative in building that era, in making that era what it is, the era of the rise of the Malayan Empire, everyone gets one final moment in the spotlight when they can do whatever they want to do, or whatever it is that makes them who they are, and then they either die or get whisked away, or we'll see what happens there. It seems that Commander Ulan is dead now at the ending, which is really sad. It's like he kind of finally stepped out of the shadow of everyone else, and then he just gets murdered for no reason. That's also part of the Malayan world. The Malayan world doesn't follow these narrative conventions that we have, that someone like Terry Pratchett would call narrative causality. It's like, heroes don't have plot immunity. They may just be accidentally killed. Something like Choss dying at the beginning, and all these moments. But I feel it is balanced well. You have all of that. There is that overarching like nostalgia and melancholy that this is like the last final moment, like the last time all of these really great people go out and do something, and then it kind of probably ends. And the question is, what will come next? Will this scene rule forever? Will the Crimson Guard actually leave? Also, doesn't that make him immortal? Like the vow of the Crimson Guard says that they'll keep fighting until the Empire is destroyed. So after Shimmer going out and saying, "Yeah, we'll leave," that kind of makes him immortal, I guess. And we talk about that a lot more in books like Blood and Bone and, well, technically, I guess, Assail. But yeah, you know, these are just, that's sort of what you get in these two chapters. They're like this huge cinematic, satisfying moments when all those people that have made the Malazan Empire and its foes, that legendary era, just get like one final bow on stage and move out. We also get, this is the other big interesting thing, which I kind of spoke about before when I said it, like the idea with like the nuclear weaponry or whatever. We have that whole scene with the curse of Hang and Hurl feeling responsible, which, she only partly is, for releasing Rylanderus when they come to the point where Rylanderus has taken apart the entire field lazaret and everyone is dead, and the field hospital, and everyone is. We see the consequence, or Hurl faces the consequences of their actions, which I spoke at the time about the idea that it is part of like how human survival works, that we take one step and think about the next one when we have time to. The thing that I said with inhibitor phase, where it is stated explicitly. Now here we see what happens when people do that, and then actually see those consequences, because they have freed something that is extremely brutal and terrible. And we see Hurl dealing with that, setting out to actually defeat Rylanderus together with Liz, and we'll see where all of that will be going. I guess in the next 3 chapters? There's 3 chapters left. So that's sort of where we'll, go next and see where all of these things are going. So, overall, this is, I feel there's not that much to talk about in these 2 chapters because it's so much action and very little else. I feel so far, Cam Esselmont has made a fantastic job, has done a fantastic job to tie all these things together to something that actually feels climactic in a lot of ways. And that's not a mean feat, because there are so many players in that game and so many different things going on. So that's pretty fucking cool. We have 3 chapters left. We'll see what happens now. The Crimson Guard is sort of Riven. Skinner and his people have been disavowed. Shimmer and Kaz are now back. Like, Kaz is back, Shimmer is on his side. The Crimson Guard has more or less lost the field, will do whatever. Lacine seems to have won, but there's still like 200 or 300 pages left, so what will happen there? Well, I guess we'll find out later today. Until then, cheers.